Well, usually during trunk or treat, I'm blowing up and tying balloons for kids, and this year we decided to do a little bit different and helped out with the hay rides. And so I got a totally different vantage point. We were up on the hill and we were able to look down over all the people. I just didn't realize the floods of people that were coming in. Anyway, it was really great how all of you stepped up and served. And of course, Robbie and Larry stepped up and helped organize and put all that thing on. And like Jay said, they served around 1,000 hot dogs or so. I don't know, how many did you guys eat? Probably not that many. There were a lot of people here, and it was just really great to see God's church serve the community. Some people, they will tell us, that this is the only place they come during that, this time of year because it's fun and it's safe, and it really makes God look good. And that's what it's all about. Our light is to shine in such a way that not we get the glory, but that our God gets the glory, and God looks good. So I just really want to express my gratitude to God for all of you this morning. Next week, something really important. There's going to be a children's ministry meeting, and all the new teachers and everything at 12 o'clock. So after services or after our Bible classes, there will be a meeting at 12 o'clock. And I guess they're providing lunch. They are providing lunch. Wow, so food, free food. Show up. Yeah, big kickoff for the children's ministry there. Now, we have been, as already been mentioned, we've been going through what's called the story, which some folks put together Bible verses and put it in book form so that you could kind of like read the story of the Bible in maybe like a novel form. And so copies of this book are available. If you haven't been able to get a copy yet, you've been visiting with us, let me know after services, and we'll get you a copy of the book. Also, if you have children, we have children's books that can go, Bible story books that go along with this. It's a 31-week study, and we're going to take a break in December during the holidays, and we'll kick off again next year, and we'll wrap up the story in I think it's late spring that we'll end up wrapping up the story, the complete story of the Bible. And we've come quite a ways so far. We're already to the period of the Judges. So if we can see our first map here, and if you're following along in the map, then this is a great visual way for you to remember the chronological events of how the Bible takes place. Of course, we started off with the Garden of Eden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And then after that, there was the flood with Noah. And then, of course, Abraham being called out of Ur of the Chaldees that goes into the land of promise. And there he he has his first child, and from him comes another twins. And out of one of those comes the whole nation of the children of Israel. And of course, one of those children, Joseph, was taken down, sold as a slave into Egypt. And then the whole family ends up moving down, some 70 persons, and they're there a few hundred years and multiply greatly and become a great nation. And then, of course, God raises up Moses, and they come out of there after the 10 plagues. God parts the sea. They receive the 10 commandments, and, of course, all those other commandments that are in the Old Testament law, the law of Moses. And then they were commanded to go in to take the land of promise, but they were afraid because of the fortified cities and the giants that lived in the land. And they would not do it, and so God said, you're going to wander around in circles for 40 years. And then finally after that, of course, they get up to the land. They cross over the Jordan under the leadership of Joshua. If you'll show us the next map there. If you're following along, there's Joshua that leads them after Moses. They cross over the Jordan River and enter into the promised land, and they conquer about that area that you see circled in red. So this is your supplemental map, and hope you're following along with that as well. And that's where we are in the period of the Judges. So now, if you would, open up your Bibles to the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth, just after the book of Judges. Remember, this is taking place, chronologically speaking, it's taking place during the time of the Judges. The book of Ruth, we'll read from verses 1 and 2 of chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, and he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. Now, the country of Moab is on the east side of the Jordan. So, they had to go through the land of, during the land of, or through the land of Moab when Moses was leading them and they were getting ready to go into the promised land. And there were several incidences with the Moabites that weren't very pleasant. If you can remember back, these are kind of their kinfolk. These are the people who descended out of Lot. There was an incestuous relationship that Lot's daughters got him drunk and lay with him. They thought, we're going to live out here. Our dad's going to die. We're not ever going to get married. We're just going to be out here destitute. We need to carry on, preserve our father's name. And so they got him drunk and they lay with him, and they both had sons, Ammon and Moab. And Moab comes out of Lot. The Bible just tells it like it is, okay? Not trying to hide the ugly stuff, just tells it like it is. And so from these Moabites, we have this King Balak, and you remember in Balaam and the one with the talking donkey? Remember that story? And there was also the Moabites that caused the Israelites to sin, to worship other gods and have immoral relationships, and caused a lot of the Israelites to die when they were wandering around in the wilderness. They also, during the time of the Judges, oppress the Israelites. They come in and they take their crops and oppress them for 18 years. So the idea of the Moabites and the Israelites getting along is just not there at all. They do not get along very well. However, we find Elimelech traveling from Israel, from Bethlehem in Israel, in Judah, over into Moab because they're going to starve to death. So he's going over there to find food and to live because of the famine. Well, while he's there, his 2 sons marry Moabite women. One woman is named Orpah and the other is named Ruth. Just imagine if those names were switched. Today we'd be naming some people Orpah. We'd have baby Orpahs instead of baby Ruths. You know, I'm really glad some of these Bible names sound good, it just kind of makes life more pleasant. All right, Elimelech and his sons all die in the land of Moab. We don't know what happened. Maybe they did starve to death, or maybe there's some kind of sickness. Maybe they were killed. We don't know what happened, but here's Elimelech and his sons dying in this land of Moab. And so here is Naomi. Here are her 2 daughters-in-law. And Naomi said, man, you know what I'm going to do? I mean, I'm here all alone. I got to go back home, go back to my family. And she tells her daughters-in-law, they're Moabite women. So you guys just stay right here. I mean, here's where you're from, and here's all your family. So you stay home, and I'm going back home. And if you remember, in these times and in these cultures, what they would do when a son died and left a widow, and they had no children, then that widow would wait around till another son came along, and it was the duty of that son to marry that woman to raise up. The first son would belong to his brother. He raised up someone who would carry on the name of his brother and receive his inheritance. That was the culture, and it would also become a part of the law of the Israelites. And that's what they would do and what they would follow. And so here is Naomi. She's obviously older, and she's a widow now. And here are these 2 grown women. She said, what am I going to do? Am I going to go get married and have sons? You're going to wait around till these guys are grown and have, so that you can marry them? I know you're not going to do that. Just stay home. Well, they hug and they kiss and they say goodbye. At least Orpah does. But Ruth hangs on. Ruth wants to go back with Naomi. Look in verse 14 of chapter 1. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. Very touching story here where this, maybe you think this may be the typical mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship? Some of you are shaking your heads. I know you're speaking of your own experience. But of course, that's the way you and mother would be, wouldn't you? Yeah, I know that you would. But it's a beautiful story of love and the companionship. And she says, I'm going to be with you and I'm going to serve your God. Here is a Moabite woman saying, I'm going to serve the God of the Israelites. But of course, he is the true God, and Ruth has faith in this God. And so that's exactly what happened. And so Naomi returns home. Skip down to verse 19 now. It says, the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. Is anyone here from a small town? Who's from a small town? Okay, I'm from a pretty small town, around 1,700 people or so. But imagine there just being a few hundred people. Anybody from a town about that small? And you know everything. Yeah, you know everything that goes on in these small towns. And imagine back then when they were just so much more of a community and knowing everybody. I mean, here's Naomi returning. Her husband's dead. Her sons are dead. And now she has this Moabite girl with her. Boy, the whole town will be all stirred. Hey, did you hear about Naomi? Naomi's coming back. Oh, and she's got her daughter-in-law with her. You know her son's died over there. Everybody's stirred up about it. It says the whole town was stirred up because of them, and the women said, is this Naomi? Now, of course, her name means pleasant. That's what Naomi means. And she said to them, do not call me Naomi, pleasant, but call me Mara, bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me pleasant? For when the Lord has testified against me, the Almighty has brought calamity upon me. She's thinking that, life is just really not hardly worth living. Nothing to look forward to. Nothing great's going to happen now. My son is dead. My sons are dead. My husband is dead. In chapter 2, verse 1, we find another man who's mentioned. And his name is Boaz. Now, Boaz ends up meeting Ruth because Ruth is a hard-working girl, and she asks her mother-in-law, let me go out, because it's the time of harvest. She says, let me go out, and I will glean the fields and so that we can get something to eat. Now, what they did in those times is, much like today, now we have the big harvest. You'll see wheat harvest. You'll see the big combines going out in the fields these days. And they'll go out and chop the wheat, and the grain will go up into the, it separates in the combine, and it'll be emptied off into trucks. But if you walked out into those fields after the harvest was done, you would still see, pieces of grain and things that are laying down on the ground. And back in those days when they harvest by hand, they maybe were a little bit more diligent, but at least some of that grain's going to fall to the ground. And so it was in the law, it was written into the law of Moses, that they were to allow the poor to go into these fields after the harvest and glean. That is, pick up anything, any of the scraps, any things that are left over. And that's what Ruth wants to do. And her mother-in-law says, okay, go ahead. It was a very dangerous thing because, these guys that were doing the harvesting and everything, they might want that stuff for themselves. And some of these people, some of the poor, they might try to advance on the harvesters and get some of that, some of the good grain that they haven't harvested yet. So they might even be beaten and mistreated or even killed because a lot of people weren't God-fearing. So this was a dangerous thing for Ruth who was a foreign girl anyway, to go out and do. But she is brave, and she steps up and gets out to do what she can do so that she and her mother-in-law can survive. And that's out in the field. She goes out into the field of this guy named Boaz, and that's where she is gleaning. Boaz finds out who she is, realizes that it's actually his relative's widow, and so he says, don't mistreat the girl. Matter of fact, leave her some good stuff there where she can get some grain. And she ended up getting a good amount of grain and coming home with it. And then when Naomi finds out what's happened, when Ruth comes back and tells her the story, Naomi says, hey, this guy's a relative. As a matter of fact, he's a kinsman redeemer. That is, he's a guy that could buy our land back that we had to sell when we got so poor. And he's a guy that could marry you. And you know how mothers are, getting all excited about getting their daughters hooked up. And this is what's happening here with Naomi. And so she sets it all up. And she says, here's what you do. After he has finished the harvest meal and he's feeling all good inside, you go down there and lay at his feet. And that's exactly what Ruth does. Ruth obeys her mother-in-law, and she goes in, lifts up the cover, and lays at his feet. He wakes up and sees her there, realizes what's going on. There's a scheme. Women do this to us all the time, don't they? They scheme and they plan and they work it out, and before we know it, we're sucked in, man. And we can't help it, like lambs to the slaughter. And here is Boaz. Thankfully, he's a good man, and he sees the situation, and he sees this foreign girl who is a hard worker and who loves God and is serving her mother-in-law. And he says, I'm going to redeem you. Not only is the land redeemed, but Ruth is redeemed. And he takes her to be his wife.